Today's discussion will be presented in three sections, since we're recording this session for a radio broadcast on Federal News Radio 1500 AM. Feel free to post questions and comments during the session, and we'll try to get them answered online. We are particularly pleased to welcome our moderator, Jason Miller, the Executive Editor of Federal News Radio 1500 AM and federalnewsradio.com. Let me turn over the reins to Jason to begin today's discussion.
Welcome to the program today. Our guests today are Mark Schwartz, the Chief Information Officer of the U.S. Citizenship and Immigration Services at the Homeland Security Department, Todd Simpson, the Chief Information Officer at the Food and Drug Administration and the Department of Health and Human Services, Marlon Andrews, the Deputy Chief Information Officer at the National Archives and Records Administration, and Rob Davies, the Executive Vice President for Operations for Vion Corporation. Gentlemen, welcome to the program today. Now, before we get started, let me set some context for our discussion. Ever since the Office of Management and Budget released its cloud-first mandate in 2011, there's been a gold rush of sorts. Like the 49ers of yesteryear, agencies and vendors alike saw the potential in this sparkling new game-changing substance. But after the initial rush, agency chief information officers and cloud service providers saw there's a lot more work to strike it rich in the cloud, just like beyond email and storage apps. Now, here we are 5 years later, and cloud is everywhere. As of September 2014, the last time the GAO reported on cloud usage across government, agencies said they were using 101 instances of cloud, spending more than $529 million. In 2016, now more than 18 months later, the number of cloud instances and the amount of money spent on platform infrastructure, software as a service, undoubtedly is ever increasing. In fact, market research from Dell Tech said agencies were expected to spend more than $2 billion in cloud computing last year. That's up from $1.58 billion in 2014. Now, despite this fast adoption, agencies continue to face several challenges, ranging from acquisition to security to having the right workforce to manage these services. The acquisition challenge is among the biggest. Moving from a pay-by-the-drink or consumption model is tough. This is a whole new world for many agencies, and buying IT services because the budget rules, well, they don't often meet that need, and they require agencies to spend or at least figure out how much they plan to spend for the entire budget before they even get started on the project. But as OMB says in the TechFAR handbook, there are approved approaches. For instance, agencies can use firm fixed price type contracts for buying services, including agile or iterative development type of services. OMB says that's not only allowed in the federal acquisition regulations, but it's done more often than people realize. Agencies also have access to better security from cloud services because of the FedRAMP program. But several agencies still need some reassurances that their data, especially their sensitive data, is well protected, since they no longer can see those servers that the data resides on. And of course, then there's the workforce challenge. We know all about that. Moving people from systems administrators to cloud service project managers requires an entirely new set of skills. So that sets the context for our discussion today. Once again, our guests are Mark Schwartz, the Chief Information Officer of the U.S. Citizenship and Immigration Services at the Homeland Security Department, Todd Simpson, the Chief Information Officer of the Food and Drug Administration in the Department of Health and Human Services, Marlon Andrews, the Deputy Chief Information Officer of the National Archives and Records Administration, and Rob Davies, the Executive Vice President of Operations for Vion Corporations. So let's just start with the strategy of cloud. How are we getting there? I'm going to turn to Todd. Todd, I've seen you speak many times over the last couple of months. Give me a sense, FDA is on their way to the cloud. What's your strategy, generally speaking?
So our strategy is a hybrid cloud model, and we are well into the implementation of that model. We have ATO'd an infrastructure as a service environment and a platform as a service environment with one vendor, and that's part of our public cloud model. We also have ATO'd a software as a service and platform as a service portion of our hybrid cloud model, and that's the other portion of our public cloud. And then, of course, we have a private cloud, which is an on-premise cloud, and we have recently invested in management software to allow the governance, the inlets, the customers at FDA to actually get access to the cloud. And we are implementing other software technologies to facilitate the management and the chargeback that's associated. At the FDA, we have a somewhat mature chargeback model when it comes to IT services. So we're using that fairly mature chargeback model to juxtaposition ourselves for a more robust consumption model, leveraging a cloud brokerage service where our customers can come in and we can price out the different options based on the requirements that our customers actually have.
So, and let's just make sure our audience understand when you say ATO, authority to operate, that's the part of the FedRAMP services where vendors go through a specific process to make sure they meet certain security minimal requirements.
Yes, that's absolutely correct. And in fact, it's, you mentioned acquisitions when you started this. And, from my vantage point, the ATO process, that FedRAMP process, that regulatory compliance piece has actually proven to be the biggest challenge. The acquisition piece, you're going to have acquisition nuances with any service or product that you buy, whether it's cloud-based or whether it's on-premise. You have to understand the licensing. You have to be cognizant of the contract management nuances. But the FedRAMP process and the ATO and accepting the risk and managing the risk while you're mitigating it so that you can get the production environment in production and the customers can start using it is, I think, the biggest challenge.
He's jumping forward for us, so we're going to go back and come back around to that ATO challenge. Rob from Vion, when you talk to your customers, when you guys are serving customers in the federal government, what strategies are you seeing? Todd described hybrid. Is that what you're seeing more of? More public, more private? What's the strategy?
We're seeing a lot of hybrid strategies there, and I think Todd described the challenges that we hear from our customer base as well: acquisition, security, and dealing with that, the authorities to operate. So one of the biggest challenges we do see consistently is the acquisition challenge, though, and how to manage budget and allocations, and looking at the cloud as a utility and a consumption-based model. How do I obligate funds for that? How do I budget for that over the course of a year? And I think in some ways it's no different than existing environments. Think of the different public, hybrid, and private options as different platforms, like mainframe, distributed, and x86, and what workload goes where, and how do I pay for it? And we've worked with several agencies to get through the traditional budget process to implement a cloud model, so it can be done. But I think there's a lot more education that could occur across industry and the government to help everybody understand just how that works.
When you talk about the strategy, and again, I'm just going to take us back to whether it's hybrid or public or private, is there a crawl, walk, run piece where people maybe, let's start with the private cloud, and then maybe a hybrid is a government only, contractor operated, and then maybe the full public cloud is something we see that everyone and anyone can use. Do you see that?
We see that a lot, and we recommend that quite often, because you don't want to take your mission critical systems and put them on a new platform right away. And you alluded to it in your introduction. How do you get those systems administrators more like cloud program managers, right? And how they have to understand different things. So definitely a crawl, walk, run approach is something we advise.
Now, Mark's shaking his head. I know he's going to have something to say, but we're going to wait. We're going to make you wait, Mark, and go to Marlon for some NARA. What's NARA's approach to cloud?
Well, the cloud, while it's a challenge, we look at it as an opportunity. And it's an opportunity to look at the whole enterprise and evaluate where we want to be 5, 10, 15 years from now. And we've broken it up into a couple of different categories: existing systems and new systems, and how are we going to transition to the cloud-first strategy, and what makes the most sense and what's most appropriate. And we really started a advertising communications campaign with our system owners and our partners to say that this is a partnership and we all need to work together to maximize our dollars and to maximize our synergies across our infrastructure. So here at NARA, we looked at it as an opportunity to really look at our services that we deliver as a whole and take that opportunity to say, how are we going to define how we're going to provide services moving forward? So it's been a very exciting, challenging time.
I think it's a great way you put it, marketing communications campaign with the mission side, with the program folks to understand. So does that means you're trying to decide which goes first, prioritization of mission versus back office? or that based on that marketing campaign?
So, well, the first thing we did was back office, because it's almost like you have to have that proof of concept and prove to your business owners that the cloud is the way to go, and that you can save dollars, you can still have the necessary controls in place, and that you still own your data, and you have to have that proof of concept. So the first major system that we went with is email. It's something that touches everybody, it's something that everybody can see, and it's how we move forward as that proof of concept to prove to our partners that cloud is the way to go for certain things. And then, but we also recognize that there's legacy applications that you just can't move to the cloud. So what do you do at that point? So those are one of the challenges I think everybody's facing. And how do you move forward with non-cloud items? Do you keep it on premise, or do you look at new technologies? Do you take that time to maybe upgrade to the latest and greatest that is more cloud friendly?
And of course, there's the whole discussion of virtualization and where does that play. But we're going to turn to Mark Schwartz from USCIS. Mark, your cloud strategy is, I think, something that is a lot of agencies are looking at going, could we follow in your footsteps? Talk a little bit about what you guys are doing.
Well, I think you could characterize our strategy best as aggressive. You know, that's really the way we think about it. You mentioned that the cloud is a game changer. And I really believe that. It's a game changer in ways that people don't even realize yet. So we are aggressively trying to move as much as we can to the cloud with a caveat, which is that we don't want to move things to the cloud unless we can engineer them for the cloud. We don't want to just lift and shift what we have. There are ways of designing software for the cloud that really take advantage of what the cloud offers and make things perform well. But one of the mistakes I think people make when they think about the cloud is they think of it as a way to reduce costs by the shared service economies of scale model. I think that's just a very small piece of where the cost savings come from and of the overall advantages that are offered by working in the cloud. Probably the biggest driver for us really is responsiveness and the speed that we can do things at, the velocity we can move at, where in our old world where we had to procure hardware, it could take us to set up a new environment to test a system. We saw it taking us 9 months sometimes just to set up a new environment, because we had to do a procurement for hardware, and then it might get protested, and then we had to get the hardware shipped to us, and we had to rack and stack it and set it up. In the cloud, we can provision new environments in seconds, and we do regularly, and that gives us a freedom to try things, to experiment, to innovate, and all of that. So truly a game changer in a lot of ways.
One of the things as we heard Marlon talk about was the mission versus back office. Is CIS, how are you finding that right balance? Because in many ways, your back office is coming from DHS headquarters in some ways, but in other ways, you have a lot of mission stuff that you're moving, whether it's the forms or some of the immigration type systems.
Yes. We have a lot of different situations. One thing, I guess I look at things a little bit differently in the sense that the business should never really notice whether we're in the cloud or not. What they should notice is that they're getting things quicker and that they're working better and scaling better. But it should never be an issue for the business whether we're in the cloud, the public cloud, the private cloud, our own infrastructure. In terms of the mission support applications versus the actual mission applications, I think there's no clear line. There's no bright line between the two. As I said, I want things engineered for the cloud to really take advantage of the way it works and to work well there. So if there's a mission support application that's well engineered for the cloud, I'd like to see it in the cloud. If it's something that's under our control, then sometimes we have to do some rewriting or refactoring of the code to make it more suited to the cloud, and that works better.
Rob, you're shaking your head. Something that Mark said struck you.
Yeah, absolutely. I agree with everything that Mark said. I'm excited to hear that perspective on the cloud, especially looking at it beyond the immediate costs and the economies of scale. That we like to talk about them as the great costs of acquisition, right? And the ability to cut right through that when you do go to a cloud model and you get things done so much faster. And that's that's a perspective that's still maturing. We see across the government right now, but I think that's the right one. It's the right one.
Todd, too many times is cost the main push for cloud versus that idea what Mark was talking about, which is really the agility, ease of use. Do you get that push and the pull from where you sit?
Well, let me just say that I agree completely with everything that Mark said. I
This
think
is not a fun panel if everyone
Yeah,
agrees.
I mean, he really summed it up well. And, cost is definitely a factor. But, and I remind my customers of this all the time. They'll come to me and they'll say, I want to do this with this vendor. And I have to say, let's step back and let's look at your requirements and let's address it from that standpoint. And we've actually stood up a cloud advisory board that dilutes through the requirements that we receive and then says, is this best suited for our private cloud? Is this best suited for the public cloud? And if so, which public cloud would it be best served in? And, the scalability is definitely an intriguing element of the cloud, which, gives us a lot of something we didn't have before. We can move a lot quicker. The consumption-based approach where we can spin servers up and turn them off when we're done using them can get us out of some real jams. So I think, again, Mark really hit the nail on the head with how he summed it up. But cost is definitely not the only issue. I will say that, in fact, just to close this up, to solve interoperability problems and to deal with applications, whether they're back office or whatever their mission orientation is, the cloud gives us an opportunity to solve certain problems. It gives us the opportunity to take a bunch of disparate systems and standardize them and get them all in the same environment. So there are elements of that I think need to be considered too as you're looking at your application portfolio.
And I think so often back in 2011 when we talked about the cloud first mandate and everyone got so excited, I called it the gold rush a little bit, a little tongue in cheek there. The idea of savings, cost savings, and cost savings. But it was interesting because as people moved into the cloud and they realized, maybe I actually spending a little bit more, but wow, am I getting so much more services, so much better services, so much more capabilities. I think that's one of the big differences I've seen over the last 5 years. We're going to take a quick break. When we come back, we can continue this conversation, jump into the acquisition issue that Todd said it's not that big of a deal, which I'm a little surprised about. You're listening to the panel discussion, The Business of Cloud, sponsored by Viant Corporation and Hitachi Data Systems Federal on federalnewsradio.com and 1500 AM.